Today we're talking about the 25 most expensive players, red, amber or green. Hit or miss. We're going to be looking at Watford's 25 most expensive players, how much they cost, how many appearances they made, how many goals and how many assists they've created. We will be looking at defenders and forwards, because they will be judged differently, and some of those performances aren't really going to be picked up in the statistics. Also, we'll be taking a look at whether or not the player is still with us, and if so, they may still retain some asset value. 25. Mario Suarez. Really wasn't combative enough for the Premier League. Was sold for an undisclosed fee, but quite expensive. Craig Dawson. Signed and really wasn't the player that we needed to solidify at the back. As a result, we ended up being relegated. Dawson was probably the best player after Operation Restart, but was then sold on to West Ham. Including a loan fee, we ended up taking a hit on him for £2.2 million. 23. STEFANO OKAKA, probably one of those players that you wonder why he wasn't used more. Seemed reasonably effective as a battering ram, but not used to any great extent, and was eventually shipped out to Udinese for an undisclosed fee. Nathaniel Chalobah, definitely green. Bought for £5.67 million after an initial loan spell in 2012 that was more than impressive. Has gone on to have injury situations that have affected his form, but really did come through last year and showed leadership stars in terms of his taking on the captaincy role. Steven Berghuis, another player who I would suggest was misused by Watford, and especially Quique Sanchez-Flores, a talented winger, able to cut in and deliver a cross. His only 2 assists came against Aston Villa. He was really quite a player, but he was sold at a net figure. We sold him for what we bought him for, so at least we didn't hit a loss. I'm going with an amber on him. Christian KABASELE. Green, if only for his social media, but he's actually more than that. He does have an error in him, but he's been a combative, strong, useful centre-back in the Premier League. One of the key offenders, OBBI, signed for just short of £7 million, only made 3 appearances, went on multiple loans to Belgium, and really didn't pull up any trees at all. Eventually sold for £3.7 million, a very large hit taken. IGHALO. Most certainly in the green here. 100 appearances and 40 goals and 11 assists after he struck up a great combination with Troy Deeney. Bought for £7.2 million and eventually sold for nearly 3 times that to China. MATEJ VYDRA. These stats include his loan period, because he only actually ever played 1 game as a permanent player, but what a player he was, scoring the goals for both the 2012 and the 2014-2015 season that took us to the playoff final and promotion accordingly. Was sold again for a profit plus a loan fee which isn't known versus Reading. 16. NORDIN AMRABAT. 48 appearances and really wasn't the creative player that we really needed, or a goal machine at all. No goals and only 3 assists, which were not exactly creative assists at that. Sold for a small profit. IGNACIO PUSSETTO. He would have been on amber because I don't think he was best used by Nigel Pearson during his time at the club, and eventually has returned to Udinese. I've put him in red because he's one of a number of players who've been shifted between the Pozzo family clubs at a net loss to Watford. We're sitting there with a loss of 36 million in the last financial year and substantial debts racked up against the club, yet Udinese are having the asset of the player. We have got a negative 7.65 million against the Watford accounts. Jose JURADO, bought in by Quique Sanchez-Flores, and really was a bit of a vanity project of a player. Highly technical, able to keep the ball, but under 30 appearances, again 2 assists, one of which was a corner, the other was giving a ball to a player who was miles from goal and then scored it. Sold for a loss of more than £6 million. When we look at our losses and our financial situation, that was a poor decision. But hey, some you're going to win, some you're going to lose. ETIENNE CAPOUE, undoubtedly in the green. Sold for a loss of 1.8 million, but throughout that, 5 excellent years in the Premiership more than covered his outlay, let alone his performance, and the celebrations at the FA Cup semi-final were worth quite a bit on their own. JANMAAT, curious case. I put him in green, but actually he's one of the most costly players per appearance and per overall that we actually had. Signed for 8 million from Newcastle. He gave us good service down the right, but ended up in a bit of a battle with Kiko Femenia, which Kiko eventually came out on top. Sold for no fee, basically left on a mutual agreement, free transfer, going back to Holland, to Den Haag. We wish him well. He put in some fine performances, and the goal against Chelsea will be one that will always be remembered. Here is a principal offender. Well, not him, but how the club has seemingly dealt with him. He was bought for 8.1 million, but immediately shipped off to Udinese, where he may have made a few appearances before being sold for 5.85 million. Again, a loss of 2.2 million on the Watford balance sheet for a player who made no appearances and therefore scored no goals and no assists. He could have been a very capable player, but in this particular instance, he's going to top the charts because he's done nothing but cost us money. 10. Will Hughes. At the time of recording, we don't quite know what's going to happen with Will Hughes this year. Last season he came out and said he was happy at Watford and he was happy to sign, but the deal had to be struck between the club and his agent. It would appear that there is an impasse that neither party are prepared to get past. But if we look at Will, we're probably going to get at least what we bought him for, if not a little amount on top. And he's put in admirable service. Just a shame he's been slightly injury prone, and also that it took so long for Watford to decide that actually in defensive midfield that was where he belonged and where he really has offered us some fantastic service. 9. Tom Cleverley. Stalwart. You can offer many opinions about Tom Cleverley, but you can never question his work rate and his effort to try to drag the club forward and to try to drag the team forward. A real captain, whether he has the armband or not. Another key offender. Number 8. Adalberto Peñaranda. We signed him what feels like about 150 years ago for £9.5 million. He was extremely young and he came in from Granada, another Pozzo club at the time. He has subsequently made 4 appearances, only in the League Cups, and he has scored 2 goals. Enigmatic doesn't quite cover it with this guy. He has not really delivered in any way, shape or form. Multiple disappointing loans. He's gone out. No, there is no resale value probably at this moment in time, or very, very little. I doubt we will see much return on that 9.54 million. Number 7, Abdoulaye Doucouré. One of 3 who really show how the Pozzo model can work. Came in from Rennes, was really mishandled by Walter Mazzarri, and eventually started really getting going under Silva, and had been excellent ever since. 141 appearances. He was a real dynamo in the midfield. Sold eventually for 22 million to Everton. Also sold to Everton, number 6, Richarlison. Again, a great example of the Pozzo model, bringing in players, developing them, putting them in the shop window, and then selling them on at a big profit. Number 5. Gerard Deulofeu. Some players are really defined by the moments rather than their stats, and Jerry certainly is one of those. Although he weighed in with some great goals and some assists, yes, he may have occasionally been frustrating in the same way that, for example, Fessy was, but he was sold at a small loss, but he was still offering great value for us, really. Roberto Peñaranda had similar stats to Jerry. However, he did it in about 45 extra appearances before he got to those figures. I've put him in amber, but he really was borderline red. We needed an awful lot more from a very experienced, very competent, and quite expensive at 12.1 million player. And especially in the last season, he really didn't deliver. Probably one of those in the model that should have been moved on at least a season earlier. Isaac Success. A more inappropriately named player there has not been. It's quite incredible that he's actually racked up 72 appearances. I would suggest that most of those have been from the bench. He's come out with some occasional goals, such as the end of last season, but they've not really been goals or performances that have made a stunning difference to a game. Wolves away 2-0 under Javi Gracia, probably notwithstanding. Bought in for 13.5 million, still looking to ship him out to a championship team who might take his wages and his love of Bailey's. Number 2, second most expensive player in the club history, Andre Gray. 125 appearances, 21 goals. That is less than 1 in 5. It really is an underwhelming player, but if you actually compare his stats to Roberto Pereira, they're not that dissimilar. But he's been right up front for that time. He's had more chances and he's missed a lot of opportunities, which is disappointing. So he's fixed firmly in the red. And finally, we come to number 1. Ismaila Sarr, still with the club. And whilst these stats only include up to the end of last season, if the first game of the season is anything to go by, bound to both rip up the Premiership and also eventually chalk up a heavy profit in the sold margin.